Hi there, and welcome to Flip the Script Season 1, Episode 11, Demo Requests and How to Build a Process that's quick, easy, and painless for your prospects. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we jump into the session, this is one of the most technical sessions that I'm going to do, and so I want you to go to flipthescript.co and download the deck so you can follow along at each step of the process. So I actually want to start with the story. I recently had to buy software because I was starting Flip the Script, and I thought, like, okay, I need a certain amount of tech stack to get going here, or, X, Y, and Z. You can think of the normal, usual suspects and players that I was thinking about, bringing on board. And the process was really bizarre to me. There was something that really struck me. Whenever I was buying the software, I had to request a demo whenever I came on the line, but I already knew the software very, very well. And B, I was just ready to buy. I was in go mode, right? So I'm trying to set this entire company up within, a couple of months maximum and trying to hit this launch for October 13th. And so I thought by the time that I requested the demo, I knew the product, I knew the ins and outs of the product, and all I wanted to do was purchase. And my buying experience was one of the better buying experiences that I've had when it comes to buying software. So I came in on the inbound line. I basically went into the chat box and I said, I have to think outside of the box of how to buy this software quickly because I know how long this demo request process can take. So I went to the chat box, went back and forth with the rep, and basically finally scheduled a time and said, okay, this is my name. This is my role. I'm the CEO. I have budget. I'm ready to buy the software. Can we schedule some time? And even that process took about 30 minutes. I came to the website looking to set up some time right away. And instead of getting a right away service, basically when I went into the chat box, it was taking so long for the person to get back to me that I fluctuated onto another couple of tabs. So by that time I thought, okay, this person is taking a couple minutes, so I'm going to go to LinkedIn and I'm going to try and find an account executive. I'm going to try to buy the software. And then I came back to the tab and realized that in the chat box, the rep had finally responded to me, a couple of minutes later. And by that time, I had an entire conversation going with someone on LinkedIn. Came back to this first person, and the first person says, oh, I thought you were gone because I didn't hear from you for 10 minutes because you weren't on the tab. Super confusing story, right? It's because buying software is confusing. We need to make it extremely easy on our prospects. Whenever marketing has gone through all of the trouble to get someone aware of our brand and ready to buy the software, we need to go ahead and convert them as quickly as possible. So as far as an agenda today, number one, we're going to go through the goals of an effective inbound line. And I'm going to remind people of what the actual goal and intent of having someone request a demo is, and a couple of common myths that I've seen some teams struggle with along the way. Number two, I'm going to go through the structure of a new demo request process that can get your qualified prospects through the line as quickly as possible and as seamlessly and painless to your prospects as possible without having your account executives waste time on the unqualified leads. Number three, we're going to go into a landing spot for the unqualified leads and how you can ensure even people who are unqualified get to know your product, but your account executives don't have to spend time on them. And number four, we're going to go through the joining responsibilities of the inbound rep. So basically, what is the role of the inbound rep in all of this mess? Let's start with the goals and the myths of inbound. So the goals of inbound are two things. Again, marketing has gone through, they have made the entire market aware of your product. They have spent a lot of money on SEO. They spent a lot of money on ad campaigns. They spent a lot of money figuring out whether the logo should be blue or green or purple and running webinars just to get people interested in buying your product. So whenever someone comes through on the inbound line, they are ready to buy your product. So the first goal of the inbound line is to book those demos. Book demos with qualified buyers. But the second goal of the inbound line is that we want to make sure that we prevent AEs from spending a lot of time on people who are unqualified. So how do we do that? Let's start with some common myths of how I've seen companies do it in the past and what's the resultant negative consequence of that action. The 5 common myths are: number 1, that you should round robin those in the demo requests to your different SDRs and make your SDRs all bound. Number 2, that you should, the common myth is that you should ask your prospect BANT questions because you need to quote unquote qualify them and figure out this information before you pass them through. Number 3, that you need to reach out very, very quickly and that there's a 5-minute rule and that you need to reach out to these prospects so that you can make sure that you book the demo with them with an actual person. Number 4 myth is that you shouldn't send any kind of unqualified leads to an account executive because you don't want to waste their precious calendar. And number 5, that your prospects don't realize what you're doing whenever you're doing it. So let's go into the reasoning of why these are myths, and then we can go into the resultant actions. The myth that you should round robin inbound came from what I can see, the following place. Companies spend a lot of money on marketing, and they know that these people are coming through in the demo request line. And the train of thought is, okay, these are the most valuable leads that we have because they convert at the highest rate. So typically for companies, an inbound line conversion into closed won can be anywhere from 20 to 40%. I've seen an aggregate of about 32% conversion into closed won. And the reason being because the buyer intent is really, really high. Whereas outbound, I've seen anywhere from 4 to 15% to, industry average is said to be 20, but I haven't seen that within most of the organizations that I've taken a look behind the curtain. It's usually anywhere from 4% to 15% on the outbound SDR or self-prospecting account executive that is closed won. And so there's a delta there. There's a delta there of about 15 to 17%. So basically inbound is more likely to convert than outbound. So the thought process is, I need to round robin these leads to my SDRs because these are the most valuable leads. So we want to put a lot of attention on them. We want to make sure that we have as many heads thinking about it as possible. We'll go through a couple of the things that negative consequences that come out of round robining in a minute, but that is the high level myth. And then we'll go into basically a system that alleviates this. Second myth is that you should ask your prospects BANT questions. So the reasoning behind it is because most people say that you want to make sure that the person that you're talking to is qualified. You want to see if they have budget. You want to see if they have authority, if they're the decision maker. You want to see if they have a need, or you want to see what their timeline is. But basically this myth, again, we'll go into the negative consequences of it in a minute. But the myth is that we should make sure that we ask people BANT questions because we want to ensure that this person is qualified. And the only way to do that is to ask BANT question is the myth. The third myth is that we should reach out more quickly, that we should have an SDR be handling this process. And we need to make sure that they reach out very, very quickly because that can cause high conversion. If we have an SDR, reach out from, I think the goal for most programs is under 5 minutes, that they have an SDR reach out either over cold call or over email, once this person is triggered. And we should run this very, very aggressive sequence in the beginning for the SDRs because, we want to provide conversion for all of those demo requests. The fourth myth is that we shouldn't send unqualified leads to AEs, that we want to protect the AE calendars, not waste their time, and protect the stage data accuracy for someone who's currently in cycle. So again, don't kill me yet. We're going to go into why that's a myth and how that can negatively impact your company, brand, pipeline, and closed won revenue in a minute. But this is a myth that I commonly see, and that's the reasoning behind it. And then the last myth is that prospects don't know what you're doing when you're doing it. So typically when someone inbounds on a demo request line, I hear BDRs and SDRs saying anything from, hey, I just want to talk to you for a minute so I can better gear your demo, so that I can prepare for your meeting. Our prospects, especially if they've been in software for any amount of time, are really, really smart. They know what's going on, and they know that this is a qualifying call where they're just being asked questions to make sure that you size them up and to make sure that they're a valuable lead. So I think that the myth is that SDRs think that if I tell them those magic words of, I just want to gather this information so I can better gear for your demo, the myth is that they don't know what you're doing. They know what you're doing. They know that you're asking them qualifying questions to see if you can actually get a demo of the product. So those are the myths. Let's go into what happens with each one of them. So round robining, again, the reasoning most people round robin is they want to keep a lot of heat on the inbound leads because they think that the conversion ratio is high. If you round robin for all of your different SDR teams, this is actually a topic that I'm very, very passionate about because I've seen the negative ramifications and the negative impact and damage it can have on your team and your prospects both. But round robining, number one, it's going to give your user a very inconsistent user journey. Let me tell you a story. When I was in college, I worked for a coffee shop named Sweet Eugene's. And there was about 60 employees that were at Sweet Eugene's. It was a coffee shop that was open from 6 a.m. all the way up until 2 in the morning. And there were 60 different employees, and all of us were trained a little bit of it in an ad hoc way of how to make sandwiches and crepes. It was part of the menu. So I remember my brother would come in every Saturday and he would ask for the same sandwich, but there would be different people working with me on different crews at that time. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, I've been coming in here for a year every single Saturday and ordering the same sandwich, and never have I had the same sandwich twice. Meaning he had ordered his favorite chicken sandwich that was on the menu. The menu looked the same. And it was the same exact shop, but because of how different people were making it and viewing it and having a perspective on how much chicken should go on there, should I have avocado? Should I mash the avocado? Should I put on the lettuce first? Should I, toast the bread? You get the picture. But because of that inconsistent flow, my brother said that he had never had an outcome of the same sandwich twice, even though he ordered the same sandwich for a year every single week. So for our prospects, especially if you're within a mid-market company or enterprise, you want to have a consistency and reign of, okay, this is what my user is going to go through typically, whenever they encounter my brand. So the first thing that round robining is going to do to your SDR team and to your prospects is your prospect, dependent on the day, dependent on the rep that they get, is going to get a very inconsistent user journey in terms of like who they're talking to, what questions they're being asked, and how they're passed through the line. The second negative ramification of an inbound line, which is very, very dear to my heart, is that if you round robin demo requests to an all-bound rep, it muddies the transparency on who is the best BDR. A KPI system should do two things. It should measure how effective someone is in their role, how talented they are and skilled, and how hard they work on an outcome basis. So whenever you are round robining demo requests, you're taking, let's say, 20 demo requests and you're sending one to each SDR on the team. You don't control as an SDR who is coming into the demo request line. You could have 20 random people, maybe 18 are qualified, maybe 8 are qualified. Maybe the VP of sales over at Oracle inbounds, maybe an intern at SMB company interns or inbounds. Maybe a senior vice president over at Twilio says that they want a demo. Maybe someone who got confused on what your product even is said they want a demo and gave you a Gmail address. And each one of these is counted as even whenever you pass it around the horn. And I think that the reasoning that most companies come up with, or the justification is, okay, well, net, it's going to end up the same, right? So over time, people are going to get, a smattering of different demo requests, and net, near the end, they're all going to get some good, some bad, and it's going to land in the same place. Really good in theory, doesn't happen on the front lines. So basically, if I'm an SDR1 and the vice president of sales of ADP inbounds and I handle that demo request, my AE is super happy because I gave them an amazing meeting. And then the next SDR, got a demo request from someone, who has a Gmail address, my grandmother, for instance, of like, she accidentally landed on the website, she inbound and asked for a demo request, and that is demo request that goes to rep number 2. Rep number 1 nor 2 cause either one of those demo requests. They don't control the consistency or quality, number 1, and number 2, they are responsible for which one comes in. they didn't plan out that ADP is coming in. They didn't deploy some amazing skill set. They didn't say some amazing thing to get ADP to come in, and the second rep was super bad and had my grandmother come in on the line. Both reps did the same exact action, and so it muddies the transparency. When you have BDR1 and BDR2, if an account executive is looking in or a vice president of sales is looking in, they look at BDR1 and say, amazing job, BDR1. You just got the VP of sales over at ADP. And BDR2, I don't know what the crap you were thinking, but that person was not qualified. And again, in both case scenario, they did not control the outcome of that meeting of like, whoever came in, it's just round robin to them. So it muddies the transparency and the outlook upon these two BDRs, because then it's up to fate, how they look to the account executive, because they essentially just set the meeting. So it can muddy what it looks like or how much produce this BDR is getting whenever you round robin these demo requests. Number 3, it's very important with number 2, but basically you have an unfair distribution on the quality of leads. So in terms of ICC, which is Ideal Customer Company, or ICT when it comes to title, there's going to be a disproportionate flow whenever it comes to round robining the leads if you don't have a better system. Number 4, and this might hit home for a lot of CROs, it attributes marketing's effort to a BDR. So if I have a great marketing team and they're running amazing campaigns, and all of a sudden the vice president of sales over at ADP looks at one of those great marketing campaigns and says, you know what? I like them as a brand. I'm going to request a demo. The BDR gets the credit for that meeting. The BDR is the one that looks like the hero, but really marketing and their efforts is the one that caused the demo requests. So regardless of where you are within an organization, it's like, regardless of what my function's been, I've always wanted, for good, bad, or ugly, my work to be attributed to me. So you have a KPI system in place if you're round robining these leads that basically attributes, it says, my friend Mike, that he does all the work and that all of a sudden I get the glory for Mike's work. So it misattributes the efforts to a BDR team as opposed to marketing whenever a really great lead or a really bad lead comes in on the line. And then the last piece is, and this is going to hit home for CROs and VPs of marketing, you're double paying for these leads. So if marketing, you're spending X amount of budget to run SEO campaigns, ad campaigns, and basically, vice president of sales again over at ADP says, oh, that's a great campaign. And I come in on the line and then I am met with the BDR, and the BDR spends all this time to ask me these brutal qualifying questions and send me through the line. I am double paying for this lead, because I am taking not only the budget for marketing to create this lead, but now I'm using the budget of actually having a human being BDR spend time with this lead. So I'm double paying for the salary of the BDR in the BDR department and the marketing leads both. And again, I'm going to give you a litany of problems here with the demo request solution or issue in general. And then I'm going to give you a new system that will alleviate all of these problems. So don't attribute me to problem girl until I can give you a little bit of a solution. The second piece or second myth is that asking BANT questions is the only way that I can qualify my prospects. So when you ask your prospects or when you meet your prospects on the demo request line, your first impression matters. So if you're having your BDRs reach out and basically say, do you have budget? Do you have authority? Do you have need? And do you have timeline? Or what's your timeline? And I'm a person sitting in front of this person that I don't know asking all of those questions. The following can come as a result. Number 1, your prospect feels like it's too intrusive. Asking someone how much money they make on a first date is not a great idea. Trust me, I've tried. Just kidding, I think. Anywho. Asking your prospect how much budget they have in your first interaction is also a bad idea. Talking about money up front can be a really tricky conversation. And so I know we're after the budget issue and do they have money to buy? But asking them this question right off the bat in your first impression with your brand, this prospect feels very objectified. They feel like you are, searching through their wallet and making sure if they, how much money they have, do they have money and how much money they have, it can just leave a bad taste in their mouth. Number 2, it's going to give you subjective answers. I always liken asking a prospect if they have budget is kind of like asking a kid if they're hungry after dinner. They say, no, I'm full. And then you say, I have ice cream. And they say, I'll make room. Budget is very, very subjective. So is need. Need is a very, very subjective criterion. And so you want to make sure if I'm going to ask all these brutal questions to my prospects, I would want to make sure that the goal is that I'm going to get really, really finite information that I really, really need. I know we really need the information, but we're not going to get the answers with asking these BANT questions. You're going to get answers that are all over the place. Number 3, very in line with number 2, a lot of times your prospects won't answer you honestly. If you ask them if they're the decision maker and they aren't, but they still need to see a demo, they'll say, yeah, I am, just so that you'll give them a demo. So it won't give you the answer that you need. And then very lastly, I don't know why it's lastly, probably should be up top, but it is of no value to your prospect to qualify them. You want to add value at every single step of the way with your prospect. And if you're asking them qualification questions to size them up, that's a really tough way to start a relationship, is by basically adding no value and seeing if it's worth it to you to sit down with them and go through your product. Third myth is that we should prevent AEs from taking unqualified leads, and that unqualified leads have no place with anyone from our company, receiving a demo. So I agree that AEs, we should protect their calendars and that we shouldn't waste their, very expensive off-record time, sitting with a prospect who is unqualified. However, you need to find a way to deliver a demo to even your unqualifieds. Let me say it again. You need to find a way to deliver some kind of demo or option to people who are unqualified for the following reasons. Number 1, it makes your prospects feel invalidated. If they demo request and you tell them that they aren't high enough and they're not a decision maker, right off the bat, they feel invalidated. And they have a bad taste in their mouth about who you are as a brand. So brand is very, very important here, and user journey is very, very congruent with that. So if you are qualifying someone and not giving them a demo, then basically your prospect feels right off the bat that you don't find value in them and that you weren't even willing to walk them through their tool because they simply didn't meet one of your BANT criterion. Number 2 is if you don't pass on unqualified leads anywhere, then basically all of the wonderful companies that are in hypergrowth are excluded. What do I mean by hypergrowth? It's a very, very big buzzword in the industry. Hypergrowth is when a company is very, very small, but they're growing quickly. So every company started small, okay? Facebook, Google, Uber, Lyft, Salesforce, all started somewhere. And they were all in hypergrowth at one point. So Uber and WeWork are both great examples of this. They basically were a small team, they had great product market fit, and all of a sudden they were spiking. And so they were going through this process where they're trying to onboard software, they're trying to find people, they're trying to basically acclimate for all of the amazing growth that they were having. So if I am a part of a hypergrowth company and I inbound on a line and I request a demo and I basically say like, hey, I want to look at your product. Let's use Chorus, for instance. I want to look at the Chorus product. And then the inbound BDR jumps on the phone and says, how many salespeople do you have? And you say, I only have 5 salespeople. I only have 5 salespeople currently. There is a chance that they could be disqualified at that point because they didn't hit the sales team size. However, with most companies in tech, especially the successful ones, they go through a hypergrowth period where it's 5 today, but it's 500 tomorrow. So if you are not giving a demo to the unqualified leads at that point, then I would have a hard time believing that they really want to come back to your software and say, okay, now I'm good enough as a prospect for you to give me 45 minutes of your time. The third one is it damages your company brand if you don't deliver some kind of demo, to people who are requesting a demo. And number 4 is probably the most important one to me personally. You are promising something that you don't deliver. So you are essentially from the get-go saying, hey, request a demo. Oh my gosh, I bet you're struggling with these problems. We're an awesome company. Here's our social proof. We're amazing. Da da da. We support this and that and the other. And like, these are all the amazing ways, that we can help. And then someone finally buckles and says, okay, I'm going to request a demo. And then they can't get one because they have a sales team that isn't big enough. So this is a mess. The demo request process is a mess. I have had buddies of mine who have been reached out to by recruiters are like, hey, please talk to us about taking this role. And then they're like, okay, well, I'll go ahead and talk to you. I'll take the interview. And then they're like, so can you tell me your team size right off the bat and what's your role? And they're like, I'm a sales development leader and my team's 15 people. And they're like, wow, we were really looking for someone who's led a team of 20 and account executives. So the user journey is like, well, why did you reach out to me? Why did you, run all these marketing campaigns trying to get me into you, if you're going to simply disqualify me and not talk to me from there? Let's talk about the myth of reach out quickly. This is myth number 4. The reach out quickly myth is that basically research shows that you should spend under 5 minutes to reach out to your prospect once they request a demo, because that can cause the highest conversion. The problem with that is even if you hit the 5-minute clip. Keep in mind, I've worked with hundreds of organizations, specifically in SaaS, and very few hit that clip of under 5 minutes. Let's say you do hit that clip and the SDR for some reason, they are just on their game. Someone requests a demo and then in under 5 minutes, they reach out. We still live in a now society. We walk into the Ritz-Carlton, the internet's not working, we have a meltdown. What's the problem? I've been in a WeWork before where the internet has gone down briefly and you see people outraged within minutes, asking about the SLA of WeWork and, do they provide consistent internet and et cetera, et cetera. Can they get a discount because the internet's not working for 20 minutes? We live in a now society. Instead of going into a litany of conversation on whether I think that's healthy or not, we do. That's the reality. So we want things when we want it, how we want it, more than ever, and we want it now. So under 5 minutes, even if your SDR team can hit that goal, is not good enough. People want to schedule on the spot, especially when they get to the point that they're ready to buy a software like I was the other day. I wanted to buy it then. I wanted to sign a purchasing order then. Sometimes they want to go through discovery, etc. But you are delaying your prospect from buying your product for the sake of protecting a few minutes on your AE's calendar. The last item here is Forrester. I read a Forrester report that talked about all the things that people consider whenever they're buying software. So they consider a myriad of things. I think it gave 20 variables. The top 3 things were peer-to-peer. So they call their friends and say like, hey, are you using Outreach because I'm thinking about buying it? And they ask the user experience. Number 2, they go to industry experts and influencers and thought leaders and say like, okay, who is Gary Vaynerchuk using for SEO? Because he's really, really high up the food chain and I want to know who he's using. And then the third thing that they most likely are to look for is reviews. So they go to a site like G2 Crowd or Trust Radius and they say like, I want to know all the reviews on who's using his software. You go 15 more variables deep. And the last variable that people want to consider before buying software is, you guessed it, a demo. That's the last thing that they want to do because they don't like talking to salespeople. So at the point that someone requests a demo, they have typically vetted out that software. They know who you are. They're looking for something very specific. They've talked to their friends. They've looked at influencers. They've read reviews. Before I buy that sweater, I'm vetting out this sweater is the right fit for me. So by the time I request a demo, I'm typically very, very ready to buy that product. Okay. So even reaching out quickly in under 5 minutes, again, it's not good enough. We need to give our prospects at the point that they request a demo, we need to get out of our own way and say like, hey, you want to buy? I'm going to move out of your way and let you buy. Sounds ludicrous to even be talking about, but we need to move out of our own way and let our prospects buy our product. So what do? We got all these problems, right? BANT's not working, KPI systems all over the place, prospect journeys all over the place. What do we do to effectively get our prospects to be able to buy our product in very, very quickly and effectively, but also make sure that our AE's calendars, that they aren't spending an hour and a half talking to someone about who doesn't have budget? So I have deployed this structure of the demo request process. Before I go into this slide, I've deployed this now. This is my third company doing this. And I had a long vetting process of like, okay, I want to be very, very intentional about how people inbound, and I want to work out the kinks early. So this is the process that caused a pretty significant delta for me now. This was the third company that I've done it. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm never going to say that I have all the ideas, but this is the best idea that I had. And it showed significant improvement in our demo request process and brought us, in one case, 70% more conversion on the demo request process. So I'm excited to unpack what we did. The first part of the process is basically over on the left-hand side. You can kind of read this. I hope you've loaded the deck so you aren't just kind of straining to look into these slides. But if you download the deck, the first piece is you are going to, in the demo request button, I would ask for an email only. So I'd say request a demo, and then I'd put a slot to the left that asks for their business email. I'd put that text in there. If they put their Gmail address in there, or they put their Yahoo address, or they put any kind of personal email address, I would hit them with a push notification that says, and you can be really, really playful with the language, but basically say, whoops, we need a business email address. Or I'm even thinking about on the Flip the Script website saying, don't be a punk, this content's for free, so I need a business email address. If you do anything with tongue in cheek with a smiley face, then it basically audits the process and helps the prospect know that you're not being malevolent, but you're really after their own good. So I would prompt for a business email, and if they put in their personal email address, then I would ask for a business email. A lot of marketing teams have said, like, if someone puts a Gmail address in there, then they're unqualified. Let me be very, very clear. Mark Zuckerberg has a personal email address. Mark Benioff has a personal email address. Jack Dorsey has a personal email address. Steve Jobs, rest in peace, absolutely loved him, had a personal email address. So someone putting in their personal email address does not mean they're unqualified. It has no correlation. All it means is that they didn't want to give you their business email address because they didn't want to be sold into. So I would require at the onset of like, I want the business email address because I want to contact you, at that address. Like, that's the minimum bar. Number 3 is once they put in their business email address, I would have it expand to a longer form. So basically ask for the demo, make it look like you only need a business email address to get the demo. And then once they click submit, it extends to a longer form. And in that case scenario, you want to gate the email address. So basically, if they don't fill out the rest of the form, then you still have their email address. So if they see like, oh, I have to answer a couple questions here, and they start fluctuating off to a couple of different tabs, you want to make sure you still have their email address because it's a very, very valuable buyer intent signal. So you want to gate the email at that point, and you want to expand to a longer form of a few qualifying questions. Being asked qualifying questions, being asked what your weight is by a form, and being asked what your weight is by someone that you just met on a first date is a very, very different scenario. So you want to take the personal sting out of it and basically ask them a few lighthearted qualifying questions whenever they're filling out this form. But if they don't answer them, you still have their email. Piece number 2 is you want to, in that form, do the hard work of having an educated guess to be helpful to them. So you can use a myriad of different providers. Clearbit is a great example of this. But basically, let's imagine for a second that I'm requesting that I know your role, your company size, your technographic criteria, selling language if I was when I use this as a chorus, and then some firmographic qualifying criterion of like, okay, I want to know, what industry vertical they are, for instance. So I would have these questions within the form that you expanded to, And I would have filled in there using Clearbit data enrichment of like, here are my guesses. You know, hi, Scott, I noticed that you're the head of partnerships at Outreach, and you guys are using Outreach for your sales engagement and Zoom for your web conferencing, and you sell in English, and you are a part of, you know, sales tech vertical. Did I get that right? So again, you want to use Clearbit data to basically back enrich this form and say on the spot, I want to take this step of understanding for my prospect here. Like, I'm not positive that this stuff is correct because all data is muddy, but my best guess, it looks like I'm the CEO of Flip the Script. The company size is me, myself, and Irene. Technographic criteria is that I'm using these couple pieces of tech. My selling language is English, and you know, I'm within sales consultancy vertical. So basically, you want to do the hard work for your prospect, especially if you value user journey for them. Of like, I'm not going to make you look to these drop-down menus. I'm even going to go to the step of suggesting what I think you are based on data, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong. So there's going to be a lot of cases where you're wrong. The technographic specifically is really, really hard to pull. So it's like, no, I'm not using Outreach. I'm actually using, you know, whatever. I'm using another sales engagement provider at this point. So I'm using SalesLoft instead. So your prospect at this point will basically say like, okay, these are the answers to this question, and I'm going to hit submit. On a side note, I put it down here, but if you're really uncomfortable with asking people these questions, I would put on the top of the form, skip to an SDR, an option where your prospects can basically say, no, I want to talk to an SDR. I want to talk to someone. I've been on a qualifying line before where I'm like, I just want to talk to someone. So you want to give them the option where basically they can skip this entire process and go talk to an SDR if they really, really want to, so that they have the option. If they are qualified, once they fill out that form, you know, let's imagine that they fill out that form for a second. They answered all your questions. They said, you know, again, I'm the CEO of Flip the Script. It's just one person. You know, here's my technographic setup. This is who I'm using. And I'm within the sales consultancy vertical. I would then, if they are qualified based on those questions that you just asked them on the website, I would route them straight to the appropriate AE. So if I was a part of the Drift team, for instance, you know, I said, this is my setup. I hit submit, and then it can lead through a calendaring solution like Chili Piper. It can lead directly to the account executive who owns that account, their calendar. No SDR. I don't have to talk to anyone. I don't have to be asked any brutal qualifying questions. You already got the criterion you need on if I hit, you know, am I the decision maker? Do I hit the right title? Am I a part of the right company? And I can calendar on the spot. On the spot, I can go to this AE's calendar and say, what's their calendar and what does mine look like, so I can set up a demo. So you've just circumvented, you know, someone where their main function was to figure out those questions. You've just done that on the website at the drop of a hat. So instead of a 5-minute process that usually teams don't even hit that, I've seen anywhere up to 15 days it took people. On the spot, they went on to the website and they helped calendar the solution themselves, or they helped calendar the appointment themselves, so they didn't have to go through any of that process. And I put point number 3 here, I'd allow some kind of field where they can put notes in that calendar invite. So basically it goes straight to the account executive if I'm Drift, who owns the Drift account. And then when I'm putting the calendar invite in there, you should leave a section for notes of maybe they want to communicate something to you beforehand of like, hey, I'd like to cover pricing. I'd like to know your competitive differentiators with Oracle. I'd like to know X, Y, and Z, so it can help better gear your time without them having to spend the time of talking to someone in between. How to keep it all even. If you are concerned, for those of you who are out there who are concerned with AEs having disproportionate amount of demo requests, I would keep a tally of the appointments that AEs have received. And there is a way within a solution like Chili Piper, I've done this 3 times again, of if I had 10 AEs, and I was concerned that I wanted all of them to have the same amount of inbound, that basically if I own 50 accounts as an account executive, and let's say 2 of them inbounded and requested a demo, that the outbound SDRs could schedule for these account executives, and it would skip these 2 in rotation. So I always want to make sure the account executives have an equal amount of inbound, so that they have the best shot on goal there. And then it comes down to outbound and how effective they are. So if you are out there and you're a sales leader and you say, I want to make sure that all of my account executives have the exact same bag, then basically there's an advanced way within Chili Piper. If you reach out to them and tell me what the Becc Holland special, you can, within the calendaring solution, say like, hey, my account executives, I don't want them to have incentive to own 1,000 accounts. I want them to have incentive of like, okay, I own 50 accounts. And if I get 2 demo requests that come in, let's say I own, Drift and Crunchbase, both of them request a demo and calendar an appointment, that basically my peers on the account executive team, for the next round of demos, it would skip over me and go to them for outbound. And the same for the second round. And then on the third round, to make everything equal, is when I would get a demo again. So that's for if they are qualified. Then again, when they fill that information in on that form on the website and they scheduled a time with the account executive, if they're qualified, that's a quick, easy process to do that. Let's pretend for a minute that they aren't qualified. They filled out all those questions. They said, I'm the CEO of Flip the Script. I got a great title, but I only got 1 person and I don't have the right tech stack and I'm selling in French. I'm not selling in English, which is a requirement for who I was reaching out to. At that point, you can do one of 2 things. You can either directly route to an inbound SDR and say, hey, I really I want to double check if the people who look unqualified on paper truly are unqualified. So at this point, if you really want to double check and you value making double sure that this person is unqualified, then you can have that person at that point where they fill out the form, they aren't qualified on paper, they can route directly through a calendaring solution, just like they did for the AE when they were qualified, to an SDR instead, and the SDR can jump on the line. It would be a 15-minute call, I would suggest, as opposed to the 45-minute call or hour call that they scheduled the account executive. It would default to a 15-minute qualifying call where the SDR is double confirming that the person truly was unqualified. There are some cases where they weren't, and I'll give you an example. Sometimes, let's say a agency is reaching out and they say like, hey, I'm only a 3-person agency and I'm looking here to get to know your software. The agency wasn't reaching out just to get to know your software for themselves. They were reaching out to get to know your software for their clients. They're unqualified, but their clients certainly aren't. So they're working with Oracle, Tableau software and Cloudflare, let's say. So the agency actually is unqualified, but who they're working with isn't. So that's a great example of when they look unqualified on paper, but they truly aren't. So this is the route that I suggest because I like to make double sure with everything that I'm doing. But if you don't want to do that, then basically what you can do is you can send someone straight to a biweekly product webinar. So if they aren't qualified, then they would route straight through to, let's say, every other week, you do a biweekly product webinar where you take all of the unqualifieds and you do 1 demo at once. So let's pretend that they went to that 15-minute call with the SDR. I looked unqualified on paper. I scheduled a time with the SDR. I got on the phone and basically I was qualified. I was that agency that's working with Cloudflare, Tableau, and Oracle. So I looked unqualified on paper, but I actually truly am qualified. At that point, you can have the SDR manually schedule the appointment with the AE. And if they truly aren't qualified, which is going to be the majority of the time, if they look unqualified on paper, it's usually for a reason. So they truly are unqualified. At that point, when the SDR is talking to the person on the phone, they can route them to the biweekly product webinar. So there's an option to do it without an SDR if you don't want to make double sure, but there's also an option for the people out there that want to double confirm that these people were truly unqualified. But in both case scenario, you want to route these unqualified leads. If they don't have the right tech stack, if they're not selling in English, if they, I'm doing all the course value prop, but If they don't hit the right title, if they're an individual contributor and they're not manager level and above, if they have less than 100 employees, if they aren't selling, et cetera, whatever the important criterion are to you and the minimum bar is for you to sell into them, if they don't hit those criterion, then you want to send them to a bi-weekly product webinar where you are basically showing at mass people your product. So what does this bi-weekly product webinar look like? So let's go through the who. Let me get out of the way. The who, the what, the outcome, and basically a little bit of training that who's running it is going to need. So the bi-weekly product webinar, again, is just going to be a webinar where every other week, and you can control the consistency. If you want to do it more than that, then you can choose to do so. But I would suggest bi-weekly, especially if you're like a mid-market company or SMB company. But a bi-weekly product webinar is a webinar where basically you are demoing your product as a company, but you want to do it on a big group because that group has said something or about their company or about their role that makes them unqualified to your company. So you don't want to spend every single time, appointment with an AE for these kind of people, but you basically want to do like 100 of them at once, but you still value them getting to know your product. We should make it easy and mandated for people who want to see our product to be able to see our product, okay? There is a lot of groundswell that can happen. So just because I'm a SDR today doesn't mean I'm not going to be a VP of sales in 3 years. Or just because I'm an account executive today doesn't mean I'm not going to be a manager in a week. Just because I'm in sales enablement today doesn't mean I'm not going to be in sales and operations tomorrow. People change jobs all the time. And so you want to make sure that if someone wants to see your product, let them see your product. But you just want to make sure that AEs aren't spending time with each case in specific. So bi-weekly product webinar, the who I would choose as a senior SDR who really, really knows my value prop and really knows my what my product does and is aspiring to be an account executive. So this is a great training ground for them of, a lot of SDRs, not all, but a lot of SDRs, lion's share, want to get into account executive work. They say like, I want to be a seller one day, so I'm going to start in the SDR world. So a lot of them, something that they crave is kind of a training ground. Like, I don't want to go into being an account executive without having the opportunity to be able to at least pitch the product once. So the bi-weekly product webinar is a perfect fit for this. Choose your senior SDR who's really, really good, showing a lot of talent and wants to be an account executive, and give them this bi-weekly product webinar and say, hey, these are a lot of unqualified, but it's a great opportunity for you to learn how to demo our product. So it's not going to be one-on-one, but it's still demoing our product nonetheless. So really, really good for the SDR. In my experience, encourages them and makes them feel like they are really making strides toward being an account executive and helps them learn how to demo so that they can make that transition smoothly. And also, all of these people who looked unqualified now know your product. So it's a win-win for both situations. So the who is a senior SDR. The what is a basic demo of your product. And what I would do is have the senior SDR, before every bi-weekly product webinar, have them take a look at the attendance and what their role is. So, for instance, at my last company, Chorus, we sold into 5 primary buyer personas: SDR leaders, sales leaders, revenue leaders, sales operations, and sales enablement. All very, very different in what they want. So you can't really customize the experience to a massive group. But what you can do is I would have the senior SDR look through the list of all the people who are attending and say, on average, who is my most present buyer persona? So if I have 100 people showing up to this, that'd be a great scenario, by the way. If I have 100 people showing up to this, if 40 are sales leaders and 30 are SDR leaders and the delta is sales enablement, then I would say, okay, I'm going to pitch this demo as if I'm pitching it to a sales leader, because for the majority of the room, that is what's going to resonate and hit home. The outcome at the end of this bi-weekly product webinar, the other great thing about this bi-weekly product webinar, sorry, I'm getting really excited, is you will end up surfacing deals out of this bi-weekly product webinar and people that look unqualified. Some people look unqualified on paper and they'll tell you they're unqualified on paper and that they have no money. But then after seeing your product, they'll say, I don't have 10 salespeople, but I can find, this amount of budget that you're telling me it costs to get your platform. So a lot of platforms will say like, hey, you need a minimum of 8 people. I only have 5 people, so I'm going to go to this webinar. But at the end of the thing, they're like, that platform was so great and looks so amazing that I want to spend the budget, regardless of if I have 5 people or I have, do have the actual 10. I just want to buy that platform and I'll only use it for 5 reps. And then if we grow, I can use the delta of the seats. So at the end of this biweekly product webinar, I would finish with having the senior SDR say, hey, thanks so much everyone for coming. If anyone is interested in pricing, from this group, then reach out to me at this email. And you will see every single one of these webinars that I did, we surfaced like 3 actual deals out of what looked unqualified of people saying like, I have the budget, I don't have the team size or etc., but I have the budget and I want to buy your product, especially based on, what you just did. So this bar for whatever you want to set the pricing at, obviously not up to me. My name's Paul, that shit's between y'all. Sorry, crap's between y'all. Maybe we'll edit that out. Maybe it's still in. But my name's Paul, and that crap's between y'all, as we say in Texas. But whatever the bar is, maybe some of these unqualified leads will hit it. And the great thing, last great thing about this webinar is the senior SDR. I would train them on how to handle contracts. So not only does this aspiring SDR who wants to be an AE, get to pitch the product, get to know these buyers on the other end, get a little less nervous for whenever they do make the transition into the AE role. Whenever these people at the prospects at the end of the webinar say like, hey, I actually do have budget and I want to talk pricing, I want to talk about buying the actual platform, you can train your SDR to start closing micro deals. So basically, they can go through the contract. You don't have to use an AE for this. In my experience, the AEs are going to start wanting to run the biweekly product webinar. I have seen that where the AEs like, hey, some deals are coming in here and I can spend 45 minutes with 100 people because I know I'm going to surface 3 deals. I've had teams fight over wanting to run the biweekly product webinar from the AE team. But basically, you want to train that senior SDR of like, hey, in the beginning, I want you to handle these contracts. And so here's some contract training and it will be invaluable to them once they make that transition. So let's talk about one more piece and then I'll let you guys get back to your day. But the 4th piece I wanted to go into, what are the comprehensive responsibilities for the inbound rep? Full disclosure, in no way am I saying that you should have 0 inbound reps and that you should get rid of your entire inbound team. However, I think that there is opportunity to scale down the inbound team. So I've had teams where they had 10 inbound reps and I could scale it down and handle it. Same net effect, actually a much better effect with only 1 or 2 people based on this process. So what is the responsibilities and what are the expectations on the inbound reps that you do keep around to run this? Number 1, I don't know if you remember in the beginning, but there's going to be a certain amount of people who gate their business email who don't fill out the longer form. So they're like, I want a demo. They put in the email, they hit the gate, and then the expanded form comes down asking them questions. And they're like, ugh, I'm over this. We're kind of flaky these days. So you'll see people who will gate their email, myself included, I've done this, gate their email and then go, I'll just do this thing later. And then they forget about it. So at that point, you have a list of email addresses that gated their email but didn't fill out the longer forms. How you can do this quick tip in Salesforce is basically comparatively the list of who filled out or who gated their email and then who converted to some kind of calendaring either with the SDR or with the account executive and cross-examine and say like, hey, here's the delta of people, that didn't fill out the longer form. But I digress. The first thing you want them to do is basically this inbound rep needs to be responsible for reaching out to the people who did gate their email, but did not fill out the longer form. So you don't want to lose that group of people. It doesn't mean they're not qualified. It just means they forgot to fill out the form or didn't want to fill out the form. So for all those people who are out there saying, what if my prospect doesn't, actually convert and schedule a time, and I'm worried that I'm going to lose my numbers and negatively impact my results, this is for you. So if I gate my business email and I don't fill out the longer form, then basically the inbound SDR should be responsible for actually running the same type of sequences and cadences and follow-up games that you were for your entire demo request base in the beginning. So basically they can run sequences, and I would even suggest that you rank these sequences for the inbound SDR. So people who appear qualified, number one, you're going to have a grouping of people who hit ICT, meaning ideal customer title. They're the right title, and ICC, they're the right company. The second sequence, you're going to have people who appear to be qualified from the company perspective, but not the title, based on your Crunchbase data that you fed through. The third sequence is people who appear qualified in terms of title, but not in terms of company. And you can switch 2 and 3 around based on whichever is more important to you, title or company. And number 4, you're going to have people who don't appear qualified for either. They don't look like they're the right title and don't look like they're the right company. You can determine who of these grouping you want to reach out to. Some people would say, okay, I'm going to nix number 4 because they look like they don't have the right title and company. But if you want to be super granular and detailed, I would suggest, always run the same kind of game. So I would develop these 4 sequences, all completely mirrored buyer journeys in terms of what you're including there, and completely mirrored language to dictate consistency. But basically your inbound SDR would be responsible for running these people through this sequence, making the calls, making the dials, sending the emails to try to get these people engaged, starting with people who look like they're qualified from title and company both. So essentially, for everyone out there who has been in a brutal demo request process or, is subject to one, this is the mirrored playbook that most people are using for all demo requests. So the goal is that you're going to trim out most of these people with the flow that you did earlier. Most people are going to schedule on the spot, and you're going to send unqualified to the biweekly product webinar. But for the people who gated their email and didn't fill out the longer form, you're going to run that aggressive of a process on the people who just gated their business email. So that's the first responsibility of the inbound SDR, is to follow up with them. The second responsibility they have is to take the 15-minute calls on their calendar. So remember, people who looked unqualified, that they, instead of scheduling an appointment with the account executive on the website, they scheduled an appointment with an SDR because we want to double check that they truly are unqualified. So the inbound rep would second handle that. Third responsibility is, if you don't want to use an outbound SDR for the biweekly product webinar and you want to use someone else, then you can use the inbound SDR. So, this can kind of fill out their day a little bit and make sure that you're, delivering a great buyer journey to all the unqualified leads. But you can add this into their deck too if you don't want to use anyone from the outbound team. And number 4, lastly, they can assemble the contracts for the people who requested pricing at the end of that biweekly product webinar. Remember, you're going to surface a couple of deals. Call me when you do. That you can have them assemble the contracts for those leads so that the account executives don't have to take care of them. So in summary, the demo request process is a mess. It is a mess. But the great thing about that, the exciting thing about that, is that we have so much room to run. We need to challenge ourselves not only in the types of messaging that we're sending to our prospects, not only in the amount of value that we're delivering to prospects, but we need to challenge ourselves from every facet to clean up and make a seamless, quick, fun, easy, and breezy demo request process for your prospects, because your mind is going to be blown at the results and the amount of leads that you were leaking out before, that now you can get that closed won business after all of the hard work of the marketing team to get them aware of your product. So I'm excited to see people, put their toe in the water with this process, and excited to see the results. So that's it, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this session, be sure to go to flipthescript.co, and I go on all sorts of rambles about sales topics that you can take a look at. And if you really like the session, be sure to go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn, where I post some occasional videos of behind the scenes so you can tune into those. Either way, hope you're having a great day.